Three, two, one, kaboom! Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 5. You heard it, of the Starting the Wave podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Hope. And just as a reminder, these podcasts, fractal casts, whatever you want to call them, are designed to be listened to in order. And I can't recap everything that you learn in every other podcast at the start of each new episode. You are so welcome to just leap in and listen to this episode. But if a lot of the stories or narratives or ideas or really any part of it seems foreign or a bit confusing, definitely make sure to go back through the previous podcast episodes, because again, I'm trying to weave this story that's going to take 3 full seasons to explain. And this season's about explaining to you about how we can definitely put a fair bit of responsibility for the Armageddon crisis at the feet of these 3 turd burgers called Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, or whatever that guy's name is, who really gives a shit. And next season's about then showing you how, look, there's these values called Greco-Roman British values. And those values definitely have, I think, a lot to say. The families that have benefited the most from those values, I think, probably have a fair bit to say about why the world is the way that it is. And then the last season is about this, actually the deepest idea of why the world is the way that it is that hurt people, and wounded people wound people, because once you realize there's no aliens, it's all just human beings on a rock with their feelings. So I'm really excited to have you here. I love putting effort into these podcasts. I was literally just in the shower before I was recording this, and I just literally was having the best time. Getting excited to come and share all of this with you and try and make the world a better place, and really make the world a better place, hopefully, and really aim to help you comprehend and understand the world a little bit better, and just start to see how the families of the world, certain families have conspired for ages and have got really, really, really good at a game of conquest or risk or empire or civilization, whatever you want to call it. And there are these crime bosses out there who've been able to give power from Bane to Bane Jr. for a long time, many hundreds of years. And understanding how that system works is a really helpful and important thing to understand if you want to understand how the world got set on fire, and how the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, instead of the definition of insanity just being the climate crisis, amongst other things. So I want you to think about the idea of a Trojan horse. This idea that you can get presented something that's actually from your opponent, and you think it's a gift designed to make you feel really important. So you bring it into the city and the culture, you're thinking, this is going to be awesome, it's going to help us, be amazing, when in actual fact, it's just a bunch of sneaky shit inside of it that's here to kind of give your city the business. And the story of the Trojan horse comes from a particular place, a particular time called the Bronze Age. And that's before the ancient Greeks. And we'll talk a lot about whether or not we should call the ancient Greeks or the recent Greeks, and just who did get to have a vote on us changing modern history and ancient history, and where exactly is the second and the place on the earth where it transformed from ancient history to modern history. And was that in the electrons? The electrons were they were busy hard at it, just getting it done, making everything ever. And they just had to stop. They all looked at each other now it's modern. Is that what happened? Or did some people write a bunch of books? Why'd those people write those books? Now, the story of Troy, fucking hilarious, because the archaeologist whose childhood dream was to go and discover Troy basically found the spot that that we reliably think, from what I understand, they reliably think is where Troy was. And he was in such a rush to excavate that, because the same city had just been invaded and destroyed over and over and over again. So what? Yeah, there was many Troys all on the one Troy. You can just literally put this into YouTube, watch something on it. Yeah, it's not going to be that hard. And basically he destroyed the level, or by a lot of the level that we thought it might have actually been Troy, which is pretty chronic. So I'm trying to give you a couple of messages in one here, you know what I mean? Not only are we struggling with this idea of hey, there's these things in culture people tell us are positive for us, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're just positive for the 1%. And then we're also getting these stories from a particular place on the earth. Yeah, apparently you can get really good Greek French fries or something there. I don't really know. Now, Trojan horse is also, of course, a type of computer virus, or a way to think about a computer virus that is a software that looks really good. So you put the app onto your culture or yourself or your computer or your imagination. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm just using the app to connect with my friends. When in actual fact, the app's secretly taken a whole bunch of the memory of your phone to give that processing power to someone else who's using that power to hack, this giant system in this DDoS attack, and you're just like completely unaware of what's even happening. So I'm trying to show you these really big structures in our culture that, from my perspective, and just because again I didn't used to know any of this shit, so I'm so excited to share it because it's changed my life when I was like able to put this together myself, or just able to learn about this from other people, or just like moving through the world. And it just made understanding this world so much easier. From my perspective, once you just get sci-fi out of the way, this world's so awesome and easy to understand. And what we need to do is so easy to understand. So I'm trying to, make this progression. And that's why it's really important to understand, like, we're doing this weave. Now, this episode is the final of these four futures. And originally the next episode was going to go more into this vision that I think we can really start to move behind. But instead of doing that, I moved that to the end of this season. We're going to go straight from these stories and these structures directly to Plato, Aristotle, and the soccer hates, or whatever, soccer droids. And it's going to be really, really, I think, important and powerful for you to be able to see, okay, look, here's the modern structures playing out. Here's how they're like controlling our inside world as well as our outside world. And then here's the ideas and the people who like started that software. You know what I mean? It's like there's this software like 3,000 years old that's just been iterated and iterated and iterated and iterated and iterated and iterated. And we can kind of follow it back and be like, it was you. Whoever we would call Kyle, whoever we're just randomly picking whoever it is. What, Kyle, why did you do that? You know what I mean? And it's going to be, I think, really helpful because if we just start tracing the money and tracing the flow of education and just tracing our way back through history and not accepting these splits that try and get forced to the people that cause so much fucking tomfoolery from my perspective. All right, so just consider history as everything from the Big Bang, which shouldn't be called the Big Bang, it should be called the Big Expansion, but don't worry too much about that. When you set t equals 0 to the thing that helps us understand what happened immediately after the Big Expansion, that shit's an infinite. So just look at the infinity that was before the Big Bang or the Big Expansion or whatever it is, and then everything from the first moment of distance until now, that's just all of history. And don't let anyone come along and try and convince you that we should split it into the present, modern history, ancient history, and then like prehistory. We just forget the Bronze Age, prehistory, and nothing really happened before the ancient Greeks. They were all stupid, and then no, actually, they weren't stupid. We just didn't understand how to comprehend the languages, and then we started comprehending their languages, and then, oh shit, we found out some of them were probably smarter than the ancient Greeks, like the ancient Babylonians, for example. But don't worry about any of this. Shh. Ancient history and modern history, and then just go watch all the movies that confirm the shit you read in ancient history and modern history, and don't think too much about whether the people that made the movies are just paid as enough attention to class as you, and they don't actually know that much more than you. Or just keep flicking through Instagram. Like, I don't really mind. Because I'm trying to show you the ideas behind the ideas. I'm trying to show you this web, because by showing you this web, I think it's real awesome and exciting and like cool to know what to do about it. Now, this word culture gets thrown around a lot. One of the best definitions I ever heard of this came from someone who I knew from a business. And their definition was basically that culture is what happens. They were just talking about a business context, but I think it's amazing for everything. That culture in your business is what happens when a member of your staff, like an employee, a member of your team, encounters a problem they don't know how to solve, and they've not even been trained to solve it. Like, that's an unknown. How does your employee respond? How does your team member respond in that situation? That is your culture. Now, I think that is one of the more lit definitions of culture. That's a really helpful thing for me to think about. And the reason that that's so awesome is because right now we're in a situation as a culture we've never been before. So we're in completely new territory, and so we're really uncertain, and we're reacting to the uncertainty in a way that has been guided by these families of big business. Because right now, everyone who's, again, I'm recording this in early, I don't want you to think I'm too, I don't know, maybe I've just got enough credit as a nerd to be able to say this to you now, but like, I don't personally believe that keeping time in the way where we go, it's December, I think it's like December 12th or whatever it is, 2025. That's actually not personally how I keep time. I think there's better ways of keeping track of the units of time. I don't understand why we just don't call it everything from the Big Bang. Like, so it's really 13 point whatever billions of years. And then you go down the whole rabbit hole of, well, how are we doing years before the sun existed? And then you're just going to redefine the year again. And then it's I don't know, it's getting uncomfortable. The long and the short of it is, though, like, the only thing I reckon if we all sat down and had an adult as shit conversation about the situation we should be working on is, why can't we just do the 900 million year one, though, where we just sort out world peace, stop killing each other for no damn reason, and just, what's that thing? Oh yeah, just have a good time. Right? We need a new set of actions. We're in this unfamiliar situation, but we need to start taking actions that are different. We need to start responding to this unfamiliar situation in a different way. That's why I'm so big on thinking, okay, how can our culture heal? Because our culture is in our imagination. Our imagination comes from our bodies, or is at least involved in the process. And so maybe if we can heal our bodies, we can really heal our culture. Because again, I think the definition of insanity is that it's rational to think like E.T. is going to arrive from another galaxy because of some shit that happened on a California movie set. AGI is going to come and replace us because of some shit that happened wherever they filmed the Jarvis bit. Like, what are we doing here? Right, we're going to go to another planet because I saw Matt Damon, I think that was in the Middle East somewhere, plant some stuff in the sand. And I'm definitely going on the cloud because I saw a TV show about it. I'm going to go on the rock, man. Get out of my face. And yet the idea that we could cooperate, build a just world, build a sustainable society, and abolish war, that's fucking crazy. But here's the thing I want you to see. Once you call someone naive, it's then impossible for that person to have wisdom. Once you call someone naive, you remove the ability to need to learn from that person. That's why we all feel so dumb. There's these games being played here to, like, inside of ourselves, fracture ourselves from ourselves and from the people around us. And I believe we shouldn't do that. I believe we shouldn't be dividing ourselves right now. We should instead be a division. Like, as in all coming together. So I'm trying to show you this ability that certain families have had down throughout time to define reason and logic and the structure of our ideas. And I'm having such a good time. I hope you're having a good time too. I love doing this stuff. Yeah. I'm just giving myself some feedback inside myself to make sure I don't have such a good time. I spontaneously combust again. It's so hard to put myself back together every time that happens, you know what I mean? Just kidding. Right? I don't think thinking world peace is what we need to do is weird. I think what's weird is how deeply unexamined and ungrounded some of our dominant futures are, and some of the things that you can just make billions of dollars of profit from just helping push forward into the world. Like, we're talking about the most number one, if we had to send a human being out to represent us against some other animal, like the pelican, the human being that would represent us, like, for the brainwashing, like, mind shaping, like, there's thousands of years of, like, family telling other family members how to make sure to control the people and convince us we're stupid. Because there's all these narratives about the future that feel totally inevitable. We just can't change them. But they're built on no evidence. It's like weird cherry picking. A lot of cultural momentum, so there's a lot of people saying the same stuff out loud, and very, 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 very large amounts of funding that's allocated strategically to help convince the people that something's happening for another reason than it is. The awesome thing about that, though, is because it plays out in media, as in what you see on a screen, we can just stare at this, what we see on the screen, and see if we can't reverse engineer it. And that's what I'm trying to show you how to do right now. Start to perceive the world that you're moving through right now, the images and the text and the stories and the people and the ideas, in a way where you can really see reality. You can really see what's going on. You can really see all this FUD, this fear, uncertainty of doubt. Almost like we're all like individual fish right now, swimming in a big pond. And there's some fish who figured out how to squirt the oil, and they've made the whole pond real oily, and we don't know what to do. Damn, I didn't know that oil. That's the first time I've made that oil analogy, and that came out real good. Woo! Right? Because we are living in an age of elite engineered hallucinations. Where myth stories, made up shit about the future, like aliens, AI, upload yourself, going to Mars, are distracting us from the collapse of life and nature here right now. The mental, emotional, spiritual, and material poverty of this life that we're all in, where we just serve the system. It's here to distract us from the need to repair and heal this place rather than escape it. Really look at this stuff. We're talking, depending on how you classify sci-fi, 7 of the top biggest movies of all time. That's chronic. Again, if there are no aliens, what are we doing? And again, I spoke about this last time. Like, what if repairing the world means people needing to say sorry? What if that's all the people who are running the world need to make sure it never happens, that we never fix this, because then they have to say sorry, then they have to feel responsible for all the shit that they did to give an actual apology. Because again, not only are these futures not scientific and are false, and not only are they just fucking made up, it's so much worse than this. They are not only not scientific at all, they're just fables and fairy tales dressed up as technical jargon to sustain existing power structures, and they're fed and taught and given to kids. Again, I started consuming sci-fi as a kid. Now when I look back at that shit, I was like, damn, what are we doing? What are we doing? Maybe what's weird is who gets to decide what's weird. Maybe what's weird is not peace. Maybe peace is actually the most logical, intuitive, and natural thing that there is, because maybe the Earth wants life to continue for another 900 million years. Maybe all the other life here as well wants to do that. And again, if logic is worth studying, then why would we not do world peace so then we can study the longest? And why do you just keep parroting ideas out loud? Like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity, when I reckon the climate crisis is way bigger of insanity than that. Why do you say these things out loud? Like, the brain is the most complicated object in the known universe. When again, I would select the womb. And in both of those situations, why can't you list the 5 or 6 other options that you then chose from? Why isn't there 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 definitions of insanity? And then there's this big argument that then you realize means that it's that same thing. Same thing for the object, most complicated object in the known universe. Why isn't there a list of 4, 5, 7, 10 things? And then you chose brain. And the answer is because you're a parrot. Like sci-fi bot, like following a script, just saying the words out loud, like repeating it out loud. And again, just to be clear, if what I'm saying right now is making you emotional, well, first of all, why? I thought the point of like, forgive me if I don't understand, but I thought the point particularly of Western philosophy isn't that, I thought Socrates just taught people to ask questions. Isn't that what I thought Socrates was all about, asking? Anyway, whatever. Because there are these immovables. There's aliens, there's AI, there's going into the computer, or there's going to another planet. And all 4 of these ideas, I want you to notice, are actually just based on these 2 immovables. Because aliens are going to have to use some form of rocket. You know what else is going to have to use a rocket? Go into another planet. Ah, shit. Huh. That's interesting. And then that other thing. Oh yeah, non-human computers. That's what AI and brain uploads boil down to. Well, isn't it interesting that we're obsessed with the two tools that after World War II, again, that's if World War II is most accurately described and branded as World War II, or maybe World War II is the life insurance term. Maybe we could call World War II something else, which would more accurately give it a name to help us understand. Who knows? Why did we choose World War II as all of the names we could have called that war? And if we started naming the wars slightly differently, would it maybe help us figure out why wars are happening? And why are all of the futures that we're heading towards, making big bucks on, all featuring the two things, supercomputers and big fucking rockets, that you needed to make sure that you have the most power in the military in the world, because you have the intercontinental ballistic missile, or you can fire it from a sub. It doesn't really matter, but no, you get the point. Why are kids' bedrooms saturated? Like, why are kids going to sleep with their face on some movie character on their bed sheet, and they're in a bed from the movie character's universe, and all that movie character does every single day is use tools for war to often kill people, and we just don't talk about it. It's like Iron Man kills a fair bit of people in those movies. And again, why are 90%? Again, if you just look at from when I did this, maybe it'll change, but if you look at the richest people, the richest 10 people in the world right now, again, always two lists of the richest people in the world right now, the richest regular citizens, and then there's, of course, the heads of state. Very different list if you include the heads of state. And of the richest regular people, so not regular people, billionaires, but because they're not regular people, they're superheroes, and we're dumbasses who aren't billionaires, and that's how you know you're stupid. You don't have $1 billion. So ridiculous. Anyway, so these hooligans, 90% of them, 9 out of 10 of them, have either got a business that has something to do with computers or rockets. Sometimes both. And that's interesting, because then the only other person who isn't that of the top 10 sells like alcohol or luxury goods, which is its own thing. So anyway, you tell me, why is fiction treated as probable and justice treated as impossible? Because these are all just kid stories, right? Just a sci-fi book, right? Again, uploading consciousness, fuck yeah, here's some money, go for it. I'm going to freeze my dead body with you and hope you can bring me back. Again, why is that not necromancy? Ending fossil fuels or the military? Shut your face, you're a naive idiot. Do you even understand the real politic of this moment that we are in? All of us big Gofton dudes, with our seats and our impressive desks, with our voices, all speaking the same cadence to give you the feeling that we, those of us behind the screen, we are the ones who understand how to rule. Do not tell us that we should need to sign the World Peace Treaty, even though, if you were trying to be a famous fucker, whichever generation of military generals does get together and sign the World Peace Treaty, we will probably just remember their names and we'll just forget every other military general's name ever. Because there's like other places in our society, if you murder enough people, the media try not to reproduce your name. So why wouldn't we just scale that up to the greatest mass murderers who've ever lived? Because once we sign a World Peace Treaty, that should be it with that, right? Mass murder? Old as shit. So if you did do that, you would be literally remembered as the greatest generation of conquerors who've ever lived. Because you'd be the generation of generals who conquered the idea of needing to have a general. Building a multi-planet civilization? Oh, multi-planet? Not 3? Oh, how are you going to do that without a Dyson sphere? Like, you could literally say that out loud at a dinner table and all good. believing that we could achieve basic equality? Nah, that's just you believing in fairy tales. Just grow up and start believing in what's real. I mean, but sci-fi books are fairy tales. This is confusing. Anyway, welcome to another planet. Yeah, the fourth and final fictitious false future. And I can't wait for this one. Quick public service announcement. If you're a boomer and you thought going to the moon was a good idea, do not keep watching this podcast. Or potentially anything I ever create. I don't know, it just depends, because I think self-love's awesome, but of course, you're a boomer, you would think self-love's the stupidest subject that's ever existed. Just for those of you at home, as a bit of a reminder, there is a slideshow that goes along with this podcast, a fractal cast, whatever it is. I do put it in the show notes. You can just go to the slides straight, or you can watch it along. I really encourage you to watch the video to kind of do this ride with me. Every one of these podcasts, unless a microphone drops out or something like that, is in one take. And the reason that I do that is because, I want you to consume this in one take. I want you to just sit with me and not speed this up. I'm not doing this in 1.25x right now. I'm doing this in just normal pace, 1x, and I want you to have a human-to-human experience with me. I don't want to create something that you're doing whilst you're flicking between things, or listen to this at 3x because you're so emotionally furious that I just studied and asked more questions that you do, that even though the people right now who are watching this haven't even gotten to deep fried yet, you're so fired up by watching one of you guys get deep fried that you're here to try and find a gap in this guy's argument. But again, I don't have a gap because I don't have an argument. I just think we should sign the World Peace Treaty. And I'm just trying to care for you, because I think even if you disagree with me, it would still be better for us to be in a world of world peace where we disagree with each other than in a world of world war where we disagree with each other. So why don't we just disagree with each other in a way that doesn't include war? What are you working on that's more masculine than world peace? Now, the reason that I just brought up the slideshow thing is because I don't know why this happens, by the way, but for some reason there's some guy down the bottom right, kind of looks a little bit like Socrates, and there's just a sentence here that says, "There are no clouds on Mars. Sign me up," as in he wants to go. Because again, to go to Mars, to go to another planet, wherever the fuck we're going to go, whatever the hell's going to happen in this ridiculous fantasy here, it's going to involve what? And the answer is rockets. Rockets massive. Yeah, rockets massive. Yeah, humanity, we need rockets. And NASA. NASA is awesome. You should go work at NASA. That's where the smart people work. Smart people work at NASA. That's why if you're at dinner and you say, "I work at NASA," people will go, "Ooh!" Yeah, because it's societally acceptable to work at NASA, but definitely not to work on the World Peace Treaty. And for some reason, just for everyone watching back at home, now on the screen, the NASA logo is a little bit hard to see because there's a giant paperclip on the screen. So, to this idea of a Trojan horse, right? A short time ago, a couple of decades ago, in a country not far away from where I am, all of a sudden a bunch of dudes decided to apparently help us go to the moon. And some people needed to visit it all of a sudden. And why men decided to go to the moon instead of just being a bunch of, nice sort of women here on the earth beats me. Now, the people, as in the regular folk, we needed to be convinced that this was a good idea. But this was a huge deal. This didn't happen in a day. It took a long time. And naturally, as the government / the business that generally runs the businesses of your local community, they got Disney to put on some mini doco TV shorts. And what we're going to do right now is I'm going to play you, and again, I really encourage you to watch this, but I'm going to play you 27 or so seconds of this clip. And I'm going to literally show you, and I want you to imagine it's 1955. So Russia hasn't even launched Sputnik yet. Right? The reason that is so important, okay? The reason that this gap here with these dates is so important is we're already being told that the reason that we're building rockets is to go to the moon and to put people into space before Russia's even really got the space race started. And again, Russia putting Sputnik into space with the exact same missile that they used to test the nuclear bus. Excuse me, let me just scrub that back. put Sputnik into space with that. Oh yeah, because what was alarming about putting Sputnik into space was not the fact that they put Sputnik into space, it's that they built a rocket that went up, and what if it just, instead of launching something up into space, it just came back down? And what if instead of launching something, you just kept the payload in? All right, here's some. So again, you're just watching TV. Here it comes. There's like a bit of an ad or something. Again, it's not really an ad. It's more like an info doco thing. But like, oh, okay, let's come around. Let's watch tonight. Oh, there's this documentary being put on about why we should go into space. So I'm just gonna. Here's 20 seconds of it. All right.
The engineer, spaceflight poses two problems. The first is, of course, to build a rocket ship. The second, and no less important, is to prepare and train the men who are to fly the future rocket ships and to provide suitable working conditions that will enable them to survive in space.
Because that's obviously why we're building rockets, is to go into space. And that's the only thing you need to know about that.
Now, again, one of the other things that's really important to understand about that, think about it, like there's a guy who's like trying to convince everyone how to do it. Again, that was before Sputnik went into space, and it was Sputnik going into space that led to the development of the internet. Because the American government got so freaked out, they started building all of these agencies, and one of those agencies literally came up with the idea of the internet. So again, the only reason we are building rockets is because we're trying to send people into space, and the only reason that we need engineers, like said something like NASA or something, is because we just need to build the spacecraft, and we'll just step straight past that. And then we also need to train people to get done whilst they're in space. And then the only reason we did any of that was to go to the moon. And that's why NASA exists, to help us build spacecraft, train people to like do whatever they need to do when they're in space or whatever, and help us get to the moon, and help us with knowledge and understanding. And NASA's part of the great quest of human knowledge, which is helping us understand reality and helping move the planet forward. And NASA's definitely not a Trojan horse, an app that you download on your phone and you're like, oh, this is really sick, I can see photos of the moon before. And you never actually wonder, well, what was the cost? What was the true thing that was put on your phone if we dig into the code of what this NASA thing is? Because for sure, no worries about it to look at NASA, the life insurance reason for NASA, if you want to be cute and be a good bot, sure, NASA's to do with spaceship. That's why NASA exists, and that's why all those people go to work. That might be why those people think they go to work. But that doesn't mean that that's the actual reason that you go to work if, of course, you're a bot. Someone else has authored your story for you. And so when you encounter unfamiliar situations, you respond with the normal set of responses that they want rather than your own true self. Because what would be the death insurance name for why NASA existed? Computers, the internet, rockets, math. These tools saturate our art. Our art, which is distributed to us by the families of big business, funded by the families of big business, and hopefully you can see now being shaped. These narratives being shaped by the families of the big business, right? Many of the richest people in the world, and this hasn't just been now, this has always been this way, now own companies that either create the media or distribute the media. And all of these people are also making money from rockets and non-human computers, which are the subject of movies considered as artistic and prestigious as Interstellar. Again, maybe if you see stories with these tools all the time, you'll think the stories and the tools are something to do with progress. $21.9 trillion has been spent on military budgets over the past decade. Less than 1% of that would fix world hunger. Why are we doing this? And why is this illogical, irrational, naive, and woo-woo, pseudoscientific to talk about? But if I bang on hard enough about AI, I can run a multi-trillion-dollar company. Again, military expenditure has been progressing upwards at pretty much a steady pace every single year. Why do we focus on this as a form of progress? And the answer is, well, we don't. Okay, so just give me, how we understand this for a second here. Okay, so we can look at Moore's law and be like, oh, look, this is a graph that's going up. It's progress. This is good. This is what we want. Yeah, Moore's law, computers are getting faster. But then when we look at the same graph, which is just pretty much going up, and it's in military expenditure, we feel queasy. Well, but this is progress. Like if you run a military industrial company, like if you make money from war, this is the greatest graph you've ever seen. This is downright sexy. Like me and this graph, we might have to have a date. If you like work for where you make money from the military, like sick. But if you're a member of the people, you look, oh, that's actually not that good. But then we show you the Moore's law graph and you're like, oh, you're sick. Do you see how they're fucking with our definition of progress? Because like hopefully when you look at this, which is the annual CO2 emissions, and you just see nothing but this dramatic rise especially right after 1950s, weirdly enough, dramatic rise, same of the computer and the rocket. Anyway, I'm going to think too much about this. Of course, the non-human computer. And you look at this and hopefully like, oh, this isn't progress that we want. This isn't progress. This is like crime. This is bad. This is the wrong way. Okay, so why don't we look at how much bigger TVs are getting and think the same thing? And if you just take away all the quote-unquote progress you've seen happen on screens or with how screens look in your lifetime, where is all the progress? Yeah, let's keep going down this idea that NASA's maybe a little bit more than meets the eye. Okay, so if I ask you who won the space race, you say obviously the US. And if I ask you why, you say they went to the moon. If I ask you how much it cost in today's dollars, you'll say 300 billion US. How many people they put on the moon? 12 dudes. If you figure out the amount of time they spent on the moon, just so you know, that works out to $1 million a second. That's alarming. It's an alarming amount of money, I think. $1 million a second. 60 million bucks a minute to put 12 dudes on the moon so they can have some memories that we don't have, and a bunch of people can sit and watch some pretty pixels on a screen and think that they went to the moon or some shit. Some dude can get out and say that's one small step for man, one giant step for the malware of the 1%'s 1%. I mean, sorry, one giant step for man. We get told all these daft things like GPS and Velcro. A lot of that stuff was already either they just contracted it, or they had nothing to do with it, or it was built by the military, or that. Think of all the time, not just of the people who work at NASA, but all the people who wear the shirts of NASA, all the people working on the movies. Think it again like a virus, like it's sucking all this time, and we need that time for stuff that's going to help us, and everyone looks at that time and thinks, oh no, it is helping us, and then when you dig into it, it's really not. This app is not what it is perceived to be. So yourself, your mind, your spirit, your body, whatever it is, that's like the operating system, right? That's like the thing that you use every day to process the world, and everything that's coming through you through a screen, education, media, the government, tech culture, they're all feeding you these apps that you're using to move through the world. And in those apps, one of the line of code says, hey, there's probably intelligent life in space. We probably have to go to another planet at some point. We're going to reach the other planets eventually, and our future is definitely in the stars. And that's a Trojan horse, because going to the moon was awesome. And you can't question it, especially for boomers. fucking old boomers. Stop being so emotional and then denying that you get emotional and thinking you convince anyone else. You don't even convince yourself. You know you're just a parrot. Just calm down and let's stop killing the earth. Okay, and here's the best bit. If going to the moon was so awesome, present the best counter-argument. Go on, so why was the moon really the objective that we were searching for if it wasn't to just take a bunch of photos? A bunch of pretty pictures on the screen. All right, now why NASA exists is the easiest story in the world if you understand the full history of like military history, and in particular some of the stuff that happened with the war that we currently in our current culture call World War II. Now, we need to keep looking at the world from a particular mindset. I've been trying to tell you this story over the weeks, that if you want to understand how the world got set on fire, we'll try and look at the world from the mindset of the people who think it's a better idea to set the world on fire than it is to have a world of world peace. Because there are people out there who believe from their perspective that's the right way for us to process this world. Now, if you can look at the world from their perspective and look at the world from the crime bosses and the crime syndicates, that's the dictators and the oligarchs. So that's like there's one family and you've got to marry into that family and they're the family who like rule the world. Or there's a big group like the mafia or whoever it is, the local gang triad, and they're the ones who run everything, right? Like think about Bane, they're the ones who run everything, but then there's this big set of families. They're the ones who run those big groups who are then running the world, the oligarchs, right? So they're oligarchs, and then dictators is like one family who was like running everything. So if you look at their perspective down throughout history, there's this inextricable link. It's just a fancy way of saying kind of not undeniable, but like unbreakable, I guess, link between mining and power. And you can kind of retell the history of the world as just, well, how were the people who were trying to kill everyone to take their shit, how were they using what they were pulling out of the ground to do it with? And if you do that, big oil is just the latest iteration of this relationship between mining and power that extends pre the ancient Greeks. I mean, we'll explore it most thoroughly with the ancient Greeks, but, it was there for the Bronze Age as well. And once you understand this, that again, oil is just something that we mine out of the ground, and you just think of big oil as the extension of big steel and big iron, like all big coal, all big, like all of it back down through history, you can really start to see how this world's been put together. And again, you have these needs. And again, this is why I've been trying to tell you a story, is because some of the reasons like, hey, why are we in a culture that can never stop? Why are we in a culture where we can't talk about our feelings? Why are we in a culture where we don't prioritize mental health? Why are we in a culture where we feel like even when we go into a hospital, we're so grateful it exists, but we still feel like something's missing from healing? How come we're stuck in these stories where it's always just sequel after sequel after sequel? And why is every movie about the hero's journey? And why does no one even question whether or not the hero's journey is a piece of malware? Right now, there are answers to all of these questions. You just have to learn to look at the world from my perspective with the right mindset. Now, as a crime lord, you have these dreams. Like if you were a crime lord and you're like, okay, the craziest, sexiest all-time dream I could ever have as a crime lord, what you're going to want is some way to never have to deal with people. So you can run your whole empire with tools. You literally don't even have to talk to anyone else because they're always coming to fuck with your shit or coming to deal with your problem or running a mutiny or whatever it is. So you just want everyone in the world to be a machine or a tool. I mean, why do we think about ourselves as machines anyway? I'm sorry. And then the other thing you want to do is you never want to have to stress about someone coming to fucking take your power. That's what. You just want to have to stop dealing with people and stop dealing with people trying to come and steal your power. Now, as this game of empire, this game of risk, this game of command and control, this game of civilization has evolved throughout time, just like sport, like the WNBA or NBA, it's a copycat league. If you do something and everyone sees it work, they're going to copy you to do the same thing because they're chasing the same goal you are. They want to have all the best art in their museum and they want to be able to tax the people the most and have the best parties with the best looking people. And to do that over time became this more and more important need to have math nerds. And you need to be pumping these math nerds out. And mining and math need to work together because they're really helpful for each other to know when to blow stuff up and how to get stuff out and how hot stuff needs to be and where it needs to go. And again, we go from just pulling stuff out of the earth that we use to like hurt people with in terms of physically having to be there to eventually being able to start to blow stuff up. And then we get to be able to start to firing stuff at one another, not throwing, again, not building a big trebuchet or catapult where I throw a rock at you. That's just an extension of our arm. No, like we can have a controlled explosion on our end and make an even bigger controlled explosion on your end. That's chronic. That took ages. Now, once we start shooting, because that's what that is, and then we start blowing things up when we shoot and we start flying, and eventually we got tanks. Again, the need for math, the need for mining, the need for mining knowledge, blowing stuff up knowledge, everything's just expanding, because the tools of war are getting better and better, and all these dictators are copying each other, all these crime bosses are copying each other, and things are going chronic. And so someone has this thought, and again, it's like a crime boss's wet dream. Like, why not just sit on my butt at home, press a button, and fly something to where my opponent is trying to give me the business, and not bring anything back? Like, instead of putting a person on it, instead of where the person is, can I not just put a non-human computer? And imagine taking one of those people and just thinking, hey, like, you're just, with all due respect, going to be like a kamikaze, and we're just going to like put you in this missile, and your job's just to not come back, and we'll just put a big bomb in that thing, like a massive, massive, massive grenade, like a massive, massive, massive artillery shell, like a nuclear bomb. Why wouldn't we just build that? Because then we could just theoretically control the earth forever, because literally no one can ever come and take our power, because if we do, we can destroy them without having to leave our house. Why are we talking about the nuke and NASA? No reason. Because it's always more profitable, and again, only some certain crime bosses have figured this out, to actually try and lock power into your hands so you don't have to destroy cities. So again, sometimes just the threat is powerful enough to get what you want. Because again, once you start getting to militaries at this point, there's like no food, no salaries, no mutinies. Like, once you got the nuke, that's it. You got the missiles and the nukes, the delivery systems. You're chilling. Right? And again, you might be able to wipe your opponent off the map. That's why this was so important for these powerful people to get, because the game literally changed forever. Now, if you want to know, okay, well, which of these crime bosses was the first guy to get really, really, really excited about this, particularly this idea of rockets, right? Well, it was this German guy who was really pissed just after World War One. He'd actually fought in World War One. Pissed about this treaty. This treaty he felt like was really restricting his people, and he wanted to find a way around it. And one of the ways around it was this idea of the rocket. And so if you ask yourself out loud, like, which is the first rocket ever really launched? Again, it's a bunch of fireworky answers to that question, but like fully long-range rocket, which is going to give people to business, was fired in World War II, fired by the Germans. It was called the V2 rocket, and about 3,000 lives were lost in World War II by that rocketry. Kind of dwarfed by the 100,000 people who died in Tokyo in one night by the firebombing. Now, this rocket was tested at this place in Europe, and because of some bombing and a whole bunch of stuff that happened, they built these rockets with a concentration camps and forced labor. That's exactly where the first rockets came from and how they were built. So you need a lot of math, you need a lot of math nerds to produce this. And again, that Conrad guy, if we spoke about a little while ago, who was interested in computers, he sold some of his early prototypes, not of the Z1 and the Z2, but some of his other computing ideas to help with munitions for, again, these same people in Germany who were running Germany after World War I and during World War II. The reason this is so important to talk about is, of course, if you want to have an honest conversation about the purpose of NASA, the easiest way to do it is start to really have an honest conversation of like, well, what is the peaceful use of a rocket? And don't say satellites. At what point can we have an honest conversation that, considering chaos theory, maybe we don't need to have as many weather satellites as everyone thinks we do? And maybe, just maybe, in the 900 million year timeline, what has been the purpose of putting all those things into space? Because let's be honest with ourselves, if you count how many rockets have been used to put satellites into space versus how many rockets have been built to drop a nuke on someone, we're talking about thousands, hundreds, tens to one every single time for military use versus civilian use. Like, what if we just don't need to keep blasting shit into space? What if we're pretty good without needing to do that? Because what if that's just all a distraction? Because there is no peaceful use for a rocket. The real only reason you need a rocket is to make sure you have this thing called the intercontinental ballistic missile, dropping not just a regular nuclear bomb, but a thermonuclear bomb. Because this is obviously the reason that NASA exists. NASA just exists to build spacecraft and train people to know what to do who are in the spacecraft when they get into space. That's it. There's no other reason that NASA exists, except, of course, if you had to distract the people from why your culture is obsessed with building these great tools of mass murder and why we're on this eternal arms race from the end of World War II to what feels like now the start of World War III. Because, of course, the death insurance term for why NASA exists is because it's death insurance. You need to distract the public from the fact that you need to build these massive rockets and heaps of nukes because everyone else is doing it. And the people might freak out and decide they don't want that to happen and want to maybe sign a world peace treaty or do something about it if they find out. So instead, let's distract them with this idea that we're really building all of this to go to the moon. Because again, anyone who wants to understand why you build institutions like NASA or a thinkery, like a big education structure, a real fancy school, just go play any computer game about civilization and war. And you just always build those things to make your military research better. Again, this line of, there's probably intelligent line in space, we'll eventually go to another planet, we'll reach it eventually, and humanity's future's in the stars. This line of code's actually just the code for there's no peaceful use for rockets. The people might freak out if they see us prepping for World War III directly after World War II. Again, the first missile that launched Sputnik into space was the exact same missile the Russians used to test its nuke. So we have to build them anyway, so let's distract them with NASA. Again, the amount of money it took to get to the moon versus the amount of money that has been spent on rocketry by the military. Maybe we don't need GPS and satellites if you stare and don't think long and hard enough about the 900 million year timeline. What are we doing? Where have we got to need to be? NASA is a front, a branding agency for the insane buildup of weapons of mass murder and destruction here on the Earth. Again, wartime rockets just used to send someone in space 10 to 100 to 1, easy. This is why we never really needed reusable rockets. It wasn't that the militaries of the world couldn't have figured that out. It's just the militaries of the world never need a rocket that's going to bring anything back. We just need the nukes. Because again, obviously the reason NASA exists is spend $300 billion to put 12 white dudes on the moon, 12 Western dudes on the moon, so they can have a mad road trip with each other that none of the rest of us ever get to experience because that's our destiny as a society. And yeah, we needed Velcro and GPS and all the stickers and t-shirts and all the kids who want to work at NASA. It's all totally innocent and totally fine and there's nothing nefarious or shifty about it. Think about how many people watch the moon landing. Why can't we get that many people to watch a broadcast about why we need world peace? And why isn't a just and peaceful world the number one thing? Why isn't no poverty, a just and peaceful world the number one thing we did after World War II? Why the fuck did we go to the moon instead of talking about World War II? Or maybe signing the peace treaties that a bunch of places where World War II there were fights haven't been signed yet? Anyway, don't say that too much out loud. And I can prove it to you, cuz. I can prove to you that NASA's just a front to hide this mass murdering tool and mindset. And I'm going to do it to you in 3 photos. All right, so here on the left is a photo of someone who helped lead the NASA fight to the moon. He literally designed the rocket which helped put people on the moon. He is the guy. We could not have got to the moon without him. And that's why he's here on the left, meeting President Kennedy. And if you're looking back at home, there's just one photo on the screen right now. Again, I said I was going to take 3 photos to prove it. There's one photo on the screen right now. Here's him shaking President Kennedy's hand. Very, very, very influential director of literally like a NASA center. Like this hugely influential person in space flight and space travel. Now, we come to a fork in the road in your life right now because there are some people who earlier in this podcast, Fractalcast, whatever it is, when I put a photo of a paperclip up on the screen when I was talking about NASA, you knew what was coming. And then there are a bunch of people in the world who have absolutely no idea what's about to happen. And for all of you, looking at this, understanding this, I learned this about maybe 10, 15 years ago. It changed my whole life. It changed my whole perspective on history. It changed everything that I had thought about the world and what had happened. Okay, so on the left, think about this. This is a guy you meet at a party, and he's like, hey, I've met President Kennedy. And I just assume they have phones back then. Do you want to see the selfie? And on the way to him scrolling past President Kennedy, he's going back to his history. So he's looking from older photos to newer photos. He's trying to find the most recent one for President Kennedy. You'll scroll past this photo. This is him standing with a whole bunch of other German scientists. And what you'll see there in the front, if you're looking at the photo there, is, of course, Hitler. Now, how did someone who's quite clearly in a photo here with Hitler, met Hitler 5 times at least, also in a photo with President Kennedy? Is this some sort of conspiracy, like again the nuclear bomb, like maybe the Russians? Remember how the Russians only really learned how to build a nuke, arguably because of the Americans? And they were really good at research and stuff, and the Germans were nowhere close to building a nuke? Yes. Yes. No, it's none of that. No. He just got to have a job. Sorry, what? Yeah, no, this isn't some undercover person. This is called Operation... This thing's called Operation Paperclip. This is something that happened, the US government did in secret, that you were not taught about in high school for whatever reason. And this was the... you're going to use, look it up. This is the US government program to make sure that all of the Nazi scientists who were really good at making weapons of mass murder came to the US after the war instead of going somewhere like Russia. And so after World War II, shitloads of high-ranking German scientists and workers were brought over to the US and given safe haven, faced no political or criminal repercussions for their actions. In fact, lived out very prestigious and luxurious lives, all for their rocket knowledge. And a huge amount of public status. They tried to explain it away as nice Germans. They weren't pro whatever. That was all good. It was just a big misunderstanding. They met with heaps of US officials, and we literally could not have gotten to the moon without them, especially this one guy, WVB. This is this like big head honcho in the rocket world. They literally have awards and honors named after them in NASA. I'm not joking. Right, here's an article I'm going to read the quote for you from. In 2022, again, there's just one of these famous German Nazi guys. His last name is Diebes or whatever. And then we have the other one, von Braun or whatever his name is that we were talking about earlier, just before that I was showing you the photos of. Okay, so this isn't about the guy in the photos. This is about another very famous Nazi. So in 2022, when the current, Kennedy Space Center director, this woman named Janet, received an award called the Dr. Kurt H. Diebes Award. So she got given an award by NASA named after this guy. NASA's press release at the time celebrated that under his leadership, NASA successfully launched multiple flights under the Apollo program, including the first manned lunar landing. They only stopped giving out that award and changed that because this article and the people who wrote it were chasing them up. All right, now to go back to the guy who was in the photo. So again, the guy who I just mentioned then, this Davis guy, he was the first director of the John F. Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and this is the first director of the Marshall Space Center, which I believe is in Houston, Texas, but don't quote me on that. All right, so, maybe in Alabama, not sure. All right, so in 2021, again, the same article, in 2021, the US Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, a Smithsonian affiliate that partners with NASA, had to remove a bust of this dude because of public pressure in 2021. They also had to remove a quotation of his that prominently displayed over a visiting hall. You would walk into the hall and see this quote: "The rocket will free men from his remaining chains, the chains of gravity, which still tie him to this planet. It will open to him the gates of heaven," which is, of course, a chilling quote, given over 10,000 people died in the concentration camps, which were explicitly created to build that dude's rockets. And here's a photo of him with the head of the SS, wearing a suit designed by Hugo Boss. NASA is about going to the moon. The guy who designed the rocket to put people on the moon came from Germany. And just so you fully understand how real this is a link to the NASA website, the Public Directory of Buildings, the NASA Marshall Center's administrative complex. Building 4200 is the photo of the building so you can see it, on Rideout Road on Redstone Arsenal, is known informally as the Weinhoven Braun Complex in honor of Marshall's first director. Again, I said to you there's buildings in NASA, informally or formally named after former Nazis, and here we go. Again, look at these photos, cuz. Tell me that NASA's about going to the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for Operation Paperclip. Anyway, I'm just a stupid millennial who likes avocado too much. Let's talk about going to Mars. Okay, so let me get this argument. Okay, so we're going to destroy Earth with our culture, and we're not going to heal it, and then we're going to export that virus to Mars, and then once we do the same thing there and eventually destroy Mars in 10 to 100,000 years, what do? Then go to Venus? Where the air's yellow? Like, at what point are we going to talk about the cost of living crisis on fucking Mars? Everything is going to have to be imported. I know you think that because Matt Damon on a pretty picture on a screen puts some potatoes in the ground and he could grow food, that means in a place where there's no cosmic shielding and things being blasted by radiation, that there's just a bunch of dead dirt. Okay, well, assuming that doesn't happen, like, do you know how are you going to order a pizza? You're never going to eat fresh food ever again. Like, how are you going to order a pizza in Mars? Do you realize the cost per kilo of getting something into spaceflight is like thousands of bucks, right? Again, last time I checked. It's like tens of millions of kilometers away. Do you realize how, like think about the surge pricing on the delivery. And then, how, at what point are we bringing the pizza dough? And then what are you going to put on the pizza dough? And how much of all of this is going to cost? And then what happens if there's an emergency? Because obviously it's months away, and then you'll never be able to use the internet in the right way again. You'll never be able to play Dota against anyone from Earth because of the lag. You're never going to be able to communicate via phone call or see any of your loved ones ever again. But this is 100% easier than signing the World Peace Treaty. Now, one of the other fun things I love thinking about this is in this going to Mars idea is that Mars has no protective shield from the just blastoise of radiation coming through from space. So it has no atmosphere, it's got no magnetic field to help lower the radiation, which means if you just live your normal life on Mars, the one benefit is on arrival you will arguably be 66% less heavy than you were now, so you will get on a scale and you will have lost weight without actually having to do anything with your calories. And you will have proved someone somewhere right. But once we get that out of the way, obviously if you're just walking around Mars, you'll just get cancer, decade, 2 decades, whatever it is. Your just body's gonna get destroyed, literally, ganked and destroyed by radiation. And obviously you'll never be able to actually walk around ever again because you have to be in a spacesuit. You're never going to be able to breathe anything ever again unless you're going to build some sort of biosphere over there, which we'll get to in a second. But because it has no shield, and it has way less gravity, not only is your heart going to not know how to pump properly, and eventually after you spend long enough on Mars, it's going to be impossible for you to return to Earth. But the only way to really get around the shielding, if you think long and hard enough about it, especially because we have to bring everything over there, and the cost per kilo to Mars is going to be chronic, let alone how the fuck we get everything back. But don't worry about that. Don't worry about how we sent why did we send that piece of trash, that robot to Mars to do fucking what? Instead of all that energy being on the World Peace Treaty. So the easiest way to be able to make life on Mars work is just going to be able to make the whole thing underground. So I don't know how we're going to dig all that dirt up and why we're doing all this instead of just Like, why are we exporting mining to Mars? Like, what's Mars ever done to us? But yeah, we're going to live under this underground society where I can never go outside ever again. And if I do go outside, it's going to be for a short amount of time because I'm going to have to be careful of my oxygen and what I'm breathing. I mean, this sounds an awful lot like COVID lockdown. Okay, so I'm going to be on COVID lockdown eternally, but I can't use the internet, and it's going to be underground, and everything's going to be even more expensive. And the only people who are going to be able to be there are rich, powerful enough people called something like Doug. And if anything goes wrong, we fucking die. Oh, that sounds like a dream come true. Let's get it on. Just for all the people out there who are smoking the Sci-Fi-Copium enough to try and think we're going to build a biosphere out there and just replicate Earth like, whatever. Earth like biology or atmosphere or whatever. Yeah, they tried that on Earth and it didn't work. Like they tried to build, they tried to replicate what it would be like to build something with no access to any outside of the Earth to build life again, and it just didn't work. It didn't work. It just failed. They tried and it failed. It's called Biosphere 2. We can put a YouTube thing in the show notes. You can watch a whole YouTube thing about it. Again, what's logical right now is you just repeating elite narratives. The stories that you hear in the Marvel movies, even if they have no evidence, because you're just a good sci-fi bot, a pseudo-scientific bot. Because these stories are not neutral. They reroute and eat our bandwidth as a culture. They focus politically and morally us away from Earth. All these stories are doing are justifying massive money, massive spending, people making big bucks and wearing fancy suits as they go on their fancy PJs. For these militarized ideas of the world and science. We need space forces and we need massive surveillance and we need AI powered defense systems. Right? We get constantly fed this bullshit idea that the quest for knowledge is more important than the quest of justice or peace. And we get fed this line all the time: a smarter intelligence, AI, a smarter intelligence, aliens. Someone smarter than us is going to show the people how to fix shit. So the solution in all sci-fi books is never the people, never regular folk. The solution, if it is a solution, is always someone smarter than us. And the elites are the people who can explain it. The smartest Tony Starks of the world, they're the people who can explain things to us. And for sure, the solution's coming soon. It's just around the corner, everyone. And while we sit and watch all this play out on a screen, the planet burns, the 1% build these bunkers for each other, and we feel frozen, and this same feeling of being frozen has been there for thousands of years. History is not what we're taught in school. Why weren't you shown those 3 photos? President Kennedy, Hitler, and the leader of SS, from a guy who has a building informally named after him at NASA. Why did we fight World War II if it wasn't as simple as we just fought World War II to stop the Germans? There's this guy called Winston who had some stuff to do with World War II, who has this idea that one of the main reasons World War II broke out when it did and how it did is because of the policy of appeasement. But he said that the British did. He said that. That's his quote, that's not my quote, that's him. If we weren't going to call World War II and we just called it a battle for empire. Again, when did the US enter the war? When what was attacked? What if it was just a big battle for empire? Well, that would mean that World War I was a battle for empire. But if World War I was a battle for empire, well, but what about Napoleon? What about all the wars that were happening when Da Vinci was cutting about? And then the Battle of Hastings. All them folk. And what about that Charlemagne guy? And then that Marcus Aurelius guy. All those battles for empire. And then what about those guys who really Julius who really liked salads? And then before that, what about those those dudes who had the star sign of Scorpios, those guys? And then before those guys, what about that Aristotle guy? Oh, that Alexander guy, that's right, that Alexander guy who knew Aristotle. what about other people before then? Why can't we talk about whether or not World War II was really fought for the reason that we're saying, and maybe even if that was part of the reason, but what if it was actually just mainly a war for empire? And why is there this big gap between modern history and ancient history? Why can't we talk more about that? History is not what we're taught in school. What we're taught in school has been so simplified down that it's literally utterly wrong. There's some things I'm going to teach you about Winston. Mr. Dr. Winston, Sir Winston, Winston Big Guy. It's going to really make you question why you knew everything about him that you did, but you didn't know anything about why anyone from Bengal or India or anyone from any of that region of the world might not think he was maybe all he is sometimes cracked up to be. Again, our stories are not our own. These aren't the people's stories. The people's story is just the same story. Wherever you're far, wherever you're from, let's just sign the damn World Peace Treaty. Always tools, super smart, super powered people, stories that are freezing us. And the next episode, we're going to trace these threads. I'm going to show you where this technology, this malware started to get built. Like, go show you the original coders. Because I want to have this conversation with you. Who gets to decide why ancient is ancient? Because I don't think the ancient Greeks are ancient. I think they're recent. And I think calling them the ancient Greeks is a part of the marketing play, which freezes us in place. Because I can't wait to show you. If you just type the ancient Greece into the place I'm getting all of these like graphics from, the first thing that comes up is, of course, a graphic of the Pantheon or whatever the hell you say that thing. And I can't wait to show you who built that thing. Not as in the ancient Athenians, not as in the people who built the Delian League or however you say it to make sure that they had enough money. No. Like the peoples whose hands placed the stones. I think we should talk about those people. We're also going to have a long conversation about why some people who think Socrates died for free speech might find a cloud particularly emotionally challenging to deal with. And whilst we're there, we're also going to get to the bottom of what a thinker he is and where it all comes from. Now, to finish this up, just to really, obviously, all the people who think, but we're still awesome that we went to the moon, though. Yeah, I'm just going to... Do you really think that, though? Because, I'm just going to... Just to finish this episode, this is one last thing here I'm going to do. I played you, 27 seconds of that clip earlier to kick this off about that thing that Disney, the thing that makes Marvel, the thing that makes the hero's journey things, that Disney, the thing that I can show you, made ads for Standard Oil, the big oil company, the big mining company, which helped set the world on fire. Disney, that thing that the US government helped to us to make these shorts on why we need to go into space before the Russians had even launched anything. Why were they even thinking about it? Anyway, so I showed you the first 27 seconds. And again, this was just played to the American people. You can look at this at home. I can just show you the clip. So I played you the first 27 seconds. And now the last part of this podcast, I'm just going to play the last 27 seconds. It's I'm just going to keep going for another 27 seconds. It goes for a couple more minutes. All right, here we go. Bye.
To help show you what is being done to solve these problems, we have called upon one of the foremost exponents of space travel, Dr. Werner von Braun, who is at present the chief of the Guided Missile Division of the Army's Rocket Center at Redstone Arsenal. He was also overall director of the development of the original V-2 rocket.
Now here's a model of my design for a 4-stage orbital rocket ship.
And where does he get his accent? And why was this? Because Disney obviously makes Marvel, and anyway.